This is kind of a mouthful. Neuroimaging and clinical research collaboration to study treatment processes and outcome, and it went on for a while after that. But this is basically what Mark and I have been up to the last 10 years. And so I'll be talking about it more from the behavioral aspects and a little bit about how our collaboration has started and how it's changed my thinking about some of the behavioral therapies that we're doing. I'm going to go really fast, so just about everything that we have is on our psychotherapy development website, so it's pdc.yale.edu, and I also want to thank NIAAA and NIDA, who have been very good to us over the years. I also have to disclose that after many years, I am a member of CBT for CBT, which makes our little computerized therapy available at cost for clinicians and researchers. So what I'll first do is talk a little bit about what our perspective has been on bridging clinical trials of behavioral therapies and imaging, mostly by focusing on cognitive behavioral therapy, and then trying to think through many of the lessons that we've learned, which is if we're going to do this, and begin to understand how these therapies work, what we need first are effective therapies. Got them, finally. And they have to be replicable with discrete components that we can understand. We have to have some control over our confounds and what else is going on as people go through treatment and their brains do change. And I'll talk a little bit about how we've handled issues of ongoing alcohol and drug use through these trials. And also, I've changed a lot in terms of how I'm thinking about what are the targets and what are the mechanisms that we're really after. And then I'll talk a little bit about some of our ongoing studies in our Psychotherapy Development Center. But by way of my creds, I was trained as a neuropsychologist way back when at the University of Minnesota, and I've always believed this, but I finally found somebody to say this. This is in a social work journal, of all places. But neuroplasticity represents a plausible biologic mechanism through which psychological interventions may exert some of their therapeutic effects. You know, we do CBT. We teach people to think different and act different. Learning is brain change, and so in one way or another, we've been after that. And so we have a Psychotherapy Development Center since 1999, entering its 25th year. So we've done things. This was with the late great Bruce Rounsaville and I and Lisa Onken at NIDA, thinking about things like this stage model, which I think has influenced this integrative work that we're doing in really important ways. We've been focused on behavioral and pharmacotherapy combinations, behavioral platforms, and we've brought 2 treatments from stage 1 to places now where they're disseminable and implemented nationally and internationally. So it's a good little center. And then Mark will, of course, do more justice to his work, but he has an incredible background in impulsivity and gambling research, with imaging with focus on the Stroop and the MIDT, and it wasn't clear exactly how that would be bridged. But I think the way you do the bridging is you put a lot of really smart people in the same room and let the junior people kind of run it for you. And that is so we have been blessed and lucky to recruit and retain great people like Iris Bolotis, Elise DeVito, Brian Killick, who's here, Hattie Kober, who's here, Patrick Warhinski, Sarah Yep, and Jinsong Zhu, and many others, but it wouldn't fit. But anyway, so it's really to their credit, and you'll be hearing about their work. So this is what we've been up to. We began with some of our center trials looking at cognitive behavioral therapy, computerized and otherwise. So we have 5 trials now completed, and this is more or less chronologically, and I won't hurt myself. So you can kind of see, we started off, so this is the type of patient, the design, we get good follow-up rates, thank God. This is sort of our yield for imaging. So of those eligible, how many we've actually gotten to go through the magnet pre-treatment. So you'll see a nice trend there as we go through. It was hard going at first. Marijuana use, don't do marijuana use. Honestly, they don't do anything. That's the lesson learned, don't do marijuana, okay? But look at this, post-treatment scan. So of the ones that we've gotten at pre-treatment, how many do we get post-treatment? It's a really nice trend. And look at that. So this is a trial we just completed. It's looking at, it's a 2x2 looking at galantamine, a cognitive enhancing agent, plus CBT for CBT. About 120 people in it. We have 59 post-treatment scans and 76 pre-treatment scans. So that's extraordinary. We also have full neuropsych batteries, full treatment outcome stuff on them, 100% genetic sample. So we are here. This is incredibly exciting. And as you can see, I also sort of linked up the scientific yield so far. So it does take a while for these collaborations to bear fruit. Early on, this is small. So we did things like not necessarily look at pre to post changes, but Judd Brewer started us off with an article where he actually took pre-treatment scan data, combining across samples. So it really took a while before we could say pre-treatment, change in treatment, post-treatment, and then what happens. But isn't this exciting? So we're getting there. Now, I just want to say, it's also a matter of when worlds collide. Because when you're doing imaging, you want nice, clean people who show up on time and aren't using a lot of drugs and are all happy to be there, and it's great. But when you're looking at alcohol drug users, you have to really think about who we're going to put into the magnet. And we have all kinds of things. History of head injury, that's 25% of people right there. Drug and alcohol users lead very interesting lives, is all I can say. Metal shards, so we often have to do orbital scans. They have a lot of psychiatric comorbidity on board, a lot of psychotropic medications. And then there was all this stuff that was news to me. Less common but memorable reasons people can't get into the scanner. Metallic tattoos, times 30, unbelievable. Broken needle tattoos that get stuck in there forever. Expensive hair extensions. They're about $100 to come in, $100 to come out, and so if you're doing 3 scans, that's more than the scans themselves. Gunshots, shrapnel, BB guns. I mean, so our patients really are very, very interesting, and so I think our yield is very, very impressive. And again, this will be echoed throughout the day, but this is sort of what we've sort of learned along the way and why this work has been so challenging. So methodologically, what you want up front is a nice, effective, standardized intervention. Until not long ago, psychotherapy wasn't that way. It's groups, it was really messy, it was undefined. I don't think manuals really fixed it very much. So we look at complicated things like treatment packages where people get different chunks of different things. There's a huge amount of variability associated with what's delivered to people, therapist effects. News to the world, not everybody finishes. So you get 3 sessions or something like that. So the way we've sort of learned to cope with that is our computerized therapies, where we really exert a huge amount of control over what's going on. Nancy Petrie with her reinforcement-based therapies, all of a sudden we can have abstinence. We can actually reinforce targets and get the behavior we want. And looking at sort of reliable modules. The other thing we need for this to look at how the brain changes, pre-post designs, it's alcohol users, so you have huge amounts of cost and late scanning appointments, attrition, and when we're doing 4-cell designs, getting adequate cells pre and post in a factorial design, that's really difficult. So jump to the chase, here's what we've learned. Lucy's limo service in New Haven, Connecticut. You call up Lucy, the person comes to the clinic, we get the breathalyzer or the urine and the assessment at the clinic. Lucy takes the person in their nice limo, they love it. It's $35, best $35 we ever spent. They take them right over to the imaging center, the RA picks them up and takes them in, and then Lucy's limo takes them home in their limo. They think it's great, that's why we got our 80%. So it's just, it's having to be sort of resourceful. So things we've learned are, having tasks that are very engaging to the patient. So being in the magnet for 90 minutes with a kind of itchy cocaine user, not too easy. I think we've got to the right spot of compensation for the tasks. I think we've been very smart to listen to Mark and have common standard tasks across all of our studies so we can combine data. And now we have a neuroimaging database I think he'll talk to. We had to have staff that was really into this, and Lucy's among service. And then again, appropriate control conditions. We can't ascribe changes that we see to behavioral therapies unless we've got a control, unless we've got some control over some of these confounding elements. So again, that's been just basic good design, careful process analyses where we try to understand what's going on with everybody. We've had to think hard about tasks linking the specific mechanisms that we're interested in brain function. So we've had to be careful about, what are training and repetition effects of some of these tasks. I think we're learning with some of our patients that the mechanism may not involve normalization. The way you kind of get out of alcohol and drug use may be different from the way that you went in. And so we've coped with that with multiple tasks. And also including new tasks like Hetty Kober's regulation of craving task that I think goes at much more clearly things like how does the brain behave during craving and changes in craving. And this has always been the one, the control over ongoing substance use. Our patients don't come into treatment clean, they don't necessarily stay clean while they're in treatment. So a lot of measuring, a lot of scanning and urinalysis, and I'll show you a very clever way that Brian Killick has brought us abstinence at baseline. So we do work with clean brains. Okay. This is how I thought about cognitive behavioral therapy for a long time. Good enough, good, that's over. But we did think about it in terms of these very specific concepts we were teaching people to control their alcohol and drug use, but also these were generalizable cognitive strategies. Coping with craving is really affect tolerance, right? Refusal skills is assertiveness. Seemingly irrelevant decisions is good decision-making skill and temporizing behavior and so forth. So what Hetty Kober and I have been working on is really sort of reconceptualizing cognitive behavioral therapy more as this top-down cognitive control training and trying to separate it out into units that can be understood in terms of how you would assess it and how you would change it. So it turns into modules. And in 20 minutes, I can't explain where we're going with this, but eventually, I think we have we can eventually assess a person, figure out where they are with decision-making skills, working memory, and so forth, and give them the modules that they need, probably through a computer, that'll get them to the point where they can actually participate from and benefit in treatment. So that's sort of where we're going with that. But it's functional analysis. If you're going to understand these patterns, you need working memory. How do we train them? Regulation of craving. Hetty's got us. Hetty's taught us a lot about distress tolerance, regulation of craving, and how that can be studied. And I think that can be applied to a lot of the components that we sort of just backed into in CBT, but a lot of CBT is really based in good cognitive neuroscience. It's also, this work has also had me shift a little bit in terms of how I think about mechanisms that are applicable here. Again, with CBT being so durable, I've always banked a lot on skills practice and acquisition, right? We're teaching some people something, they're carrying with them. We see these nice durability of effects. We've got to be able to see that in the brain, right? We don't really anticipate direct effects on cognitive functioning. There's nothing about CBT that's going to improve attention and working memory, right? So, essentially what we're thinking is more top-down cognitive control. We're really teaching people to temporize their behavior, make decisions better, and that may be our target. And then again, what are we doing trying to teach people all these complicated skills while their brains are still really, really compromised by alcohol and drugs and all these other kinds of things. So this is what I think we were pretending was going on for many years when we approached that. when we did our early study. So we just did pre-treatment scan. People got some form of treatment, maybe with the control, maybe not. Magically, their alcohol and drug use would go away. We do a post-treatment scan, and we get something like this. This is actual data. I don't think it means anything. Hetty's probably going, oh God, don't show that. Because, you know, this, to an audience other than yourselves, to a lay audience, this would be pretty impressive, right? Oh my! For CBT, the Stroop effect, look at frontal, there's some change from pre to post. TAU, you don't see that, you see something else. Okay, but this is 11 brains. We don't control, you know, we're not controlling for exposure to treatment, ongoing cocaine use, or anything else. So what does it really mean? We don't really know what we're getting. I think the challenge is this, that it's a whole lot more complicated. So here's our pre-treatment scan, here's our post-treatment scan, but we're working with, you need to know a lot about the person's baseline cognitive functioning, their ongoing and history of alcohol and drug use. We have to think really carefully about this part. I know John will take us to school on this, but treatment-specific effects, common factors, and thoughtful control conditions that really control for you know, what we're trying to affect. Some of those things may change drug abuse and drug and alcohol use. Those, in fact, may change cognitive functioning. It's really complicated. We may, in fact, teach people some skills that may affect their drug and alcohol use and their cognitive functioning. We have to get a handle on this. And I think it's only going to be through the kinds of studies that we're starting to do now. But this is under review from another complicated study we did looking at disulfiram in cocaine, disulfiram cognitive behavioral therapy, and Nancy Petrie's prize contingency management using the Stroop test in about 35 patients. So we see nice pre-post-treatment Stroop effects. But rather than sort of simplistically just relating these things to changes in drug use, what Hetty and Lisa have done is really relate this to the processes of treatment. And it looks like there are different patterns of correlations between involvement in CBT, exposure to CM, and so forth. These are the kinds of things that we should be beginning to parse out. I'm going to go really fast. The other exciting thing is that we're starting to do all this stuff with computerized therapy. So computerized therapies are great for dissemination, right? We've got something that works. All of a sudden, you can make it available for basically no cost, and people are getting something. They're not just sitting there in a group having somebody yell at them. Good enough. But they're getting something that we know works. But what's really exciting about this is that it's computerized, it's standardized. We can define what the modules are. Does the person get it? Is there change over time? It's standardized, and we're on our way. So I'm not going to say too much about CBT, but basically what we've tried to build is a skills training machine, right? We have one module that teaches coping with craving. We have one module that teaches decision-making tasks, and we try to do it in a really engaging way with these little movies, with a lot of homework, and you know, it's good cognitive training. Anyway, you can go to the website and see it, but 7 modules. They take about an hour each, but we have control over our therapy, and it sort of works. So our first CBT trial, this was all comers, 8-week trial. We got this was an add-on, CBT added on to treatment as usual in an outpatient place. We got a 20% difference in urine. So that's pretty good for a little machine. And it looks a lot like regular CBT. So there's our sleeper effect through 6 months. It shows up in urine. So we're teaching people something that stays with them. And here's what our Brian did. We looked at our measure of skills acquisition, which is a role-play test, and probably is several degrees away from what people are actually doing in the real world. But at baseline, people kind of start out, treatment as usual, what do you know? It doesn't teach people a whole lot of these skills. What are we paying for? I don't know. At the end of treatment, there was an increase in the computerized therapy group, but it increased through the follow-up. So we are teaching people effectively. And we got to the holy grail of psychotherapy research, sort of. So with a lot of caveats, this wasn't perfect. a mediation, but Brian was able to show that increase in coping skills was associated with the reduction of use. So we've got, I think, a machine that we can really begin to use to study the treatment and how it works. This is our second trial, which was just completed. This was cocaine users in methadone, so the overall effects were not quite as strong as in the outpatient trial, but the difference between CBT and TAU was there. The sleeper effect was there again too. And guess what? This has to do with cognition. We got genetics. This was a priori. We looked at one SNP. We looked at COMT in the group, and we actually did. This was an a priori hypothesis, but it turns out that, and this is the rates of patients who get to 3 or more weeks of abstinence in the trial, which is a kind of a quick and dirty way of figuring out who's going to do really well. So it turns out people who are carrying at least one VAL allele, which has something to do with cognitive flexibility, do really, really well in CBT. About 5? Okay. We can go places with this. It's very exciting. And again, using these kind of computerized therapy, I think we can get to the specificity because we take out a lot of the variability in treatment that was going on before. And so this is something that Elise DeVito's working on with Brian again. This is the emotional cocaine stroop from the same study. And so I think, so neutral cues are, this is CBT neutral cue, this is TAU with the neutral cue, CAU with the cocaine cues and the emotional stroop, kind of flat. Look at that for CBT, what do you know? So it looks like our little machine is helping people sort of be a little less undone when exposed to these cues. And again, this is hot off the press. This is Brian's R21. We came up with alcohol-specific CBT for CBT. The difference between this and our earlier work is that we actually put CBT for CBT out there not as an add-on to treatment, but can it stand up by itself as essentially a sole treatment with really minimal clinical monitoring. And so our questions were, would it retain people? Is it safe? Is it just as good as the combination? TAU just doesn't look so good. Hardly anybody finished and hardly anybody got abstinent. CBT by itself did really well. So again, hopefully we'll be able to, this was only 68 people, I think. 68 primary alcohol users. Hopefully we can kind of ramp this up. And so I'm going to go really quickly through some of the stuff that we're doing. Brian's project in our current study has this question that I think we should have been asking a long time ago, which is, what happens if we actually expose people to cognitive CBT with not only abstinence, but with brains that are maybe functioning a little bit better? So taking some inspiration from some of Bruce Wexler's work, we've done a little cognitive control training. So what we're doing is looking at the effects of abstinence, a period of about a month of abstinence facilitated with contingency management before people begin treatment, good idea, compared with abstinence plus 4 weeks of cognitive control training prior to engaging in CBT. And through Mark and Hetty and our partners will be doing neurocog assessment and fMRI before that preparatory period, after that preparatory period, and then at the end of 6 months, so we can finally separate the effects of abstinence, the effects of training, and so forth. All right. Way back when, Bruce Roundsman was really interested in us doing this cognitive rehab training with drug abusers, inspired by Bruce Wexler's work, right? It turns out cocaine users will not do these tasks. They just won't. We have 3 failed trials, and what we learned was, and this was in the course of methadone, IOP, and day treatment, really abysmal retention. We got nobody to the end, and really the only effect that we got was that Mavis Beacon Teaches Typing, which was our control condition, was way better for veterans than PSS rehab. So we had to rethink it. So This is also no. So this is Brian's pilot study. I think I'm almost out of time, so I'm going to go really fast. But Brian cracked it. So how do we do cognitive control training with substance users? How do we affect the motivational piece? We use contingency management. So this was a small pilot that we just completed. It was a really feasibility proof of concept study that looked at whether if you actually reinforce for performance on these cognitive retraining tasks with substance users, can you get an effect? So these were alcohol or cocaine dependent patients who were abstinent for at least 30 days with some mild cognitive impairment. We didn't do a control condition for this one because it was a pilot, but we did standard cognitive retraining where they were reinforced for just showing up, and then when we did one where there was a complicated algorithm, but they got paid for increased performance on the tasks. This was a month. They came in 3 times a week. We focused on attention, memory, and executive functioning. Here's the news. We got everybody to finish. We've never had a study where we actually got substance users to sit through that kind of training. So we've got that licked at least. I'm running out of time, but both conditions did something. I do wish we had a control, but it was a pilot. But getting people, just paying people to show up did something. But it does look like the paying performance did a little oomph. We got a significant effect on Trails B. So we're moving into our new study there. I was going to talk about Hetty's project, which I think is the future of behavioral therapies research, but I'm going to let her do that. And thank you, and I'll turn it over to Mark.